Hey guys, welcome back to Unstop Biology. So today we are going to start off with a new chapter, which is transport in plants. So we are right now dealing with the chapter 11 of class 11th NCERT, right? So we'll start off with transport in plants. So guys, before I start off with the video, please do remember that your feedback is really important for me. So please do not forget to give your feedback in comments for all the videos that you see. That will help me in improvising the videos as per your requirement. So yes, I'll be waiting for your comments. Please do mention in comments whether you like the video or if you have any doubts or if you want me to change anything in my videos, right? So let's start off now with the transport and plant. So, guys, we see so many tall trees, or even small bushes, shrubs, or even very small grasses, right? So, and did you ever think of how the transport happens in plants? How the water or the food that the leaves prepare, they are distributed in the plants, how the water which is sucked up by the roots reaches to the very top of the plant. So all of that happens through various means, right? So basically in a flowering plant, the substance that would need to be transported are what? These substances can be water, mineral nutrients, organic nutrients, and different growth regulators as well. Basically plant hormones, right? So basically what happens is that over small distance, if the distance is very small, the substance move by diffusion, that is one, and by cytoplasmic streaming, which is supplemented by active transport. So basically, the plant uses ATP, uses energy to transport these substances over small distance. So what I said, if it's over small distance, this can be by diffusion, by cytoplasmic streaming, using ATP, right? So by active transport. Now, what happens over long distance? So, over longer distance, all the substances which are required are transported through the vascular system, through the vascular system. And what is the vascular system present in plants? It is either xylem or phloem, right? So now what happens is that in rooted plants, transport in xylem is basically unidirectional, which is from roots to the stem, right? So trans in rooted plants and transport in xylem, and what all transport is done through xylem, it is either water or minerals or both, right? So water and minerals are transported through xylem. Remember that. And in rooted plants, this transport is unidirectional, right? So basically, it is from root to stems, right? So in xylem, it is either water or minerals, and this transport is unidirectional, right? Now, organic and mineral nutrients, they basically undergo multidirectional transport. Remember that, right? So, the organic compounds which are synthesized in the leaves, all those are trans exported to other parts of the plants, right? So basically the food that the plants prepare through photosynthesis, that those are prepared in the leaves, right? So these are organic compounds, right? So these are transported in multidirectional way, and it is transported from from the leaves to all part of the plants, including the storage organs as well, right? And then from the storage organs, they are later re-exported. So basically, it's just also stored in the storage organs, and if needed, they are again exported from the storage organs, right? So basically, the mineral nutrients are taken up by the roots, and these are transported upward into the stem, leaves, and all the growing regions, right? Now, what happens when the plant parts die? So, when the plant part basically undergoes senescence, so we call this term as senescence, right? So when any part of a plant dies, these nutrient may be withdrawn from such regions and they move to the growing parts, right? So apart from that, we have hormones or plant growth regulators that they are kind of transported to all the areas where they're required. So there are hormones, there are different plant growth regulators, there are chemical stimuli. Those are also transported in small amount, right? And those are transported in a strictly polarized or unidirectional manner from where they are synthesized to the part where they are required, right? So now you can understand that in flowering plants specifically, there is a very complex traffic of compounds, right? And all of these compounds are moving in different directions, right? And then what is happening is that each organ is receiving substance and they are giving out other substances. It's something like that, right? So let's see what are the means of transport basically. So the first means of transport is diffusion. Now what happens in diffusion? Let's see that, right? So diffusion is basically passive transport. Now what do you mean by passive transport? So basically you do not need any kind of energy in the form of ATP to facilitate this transport basically, right? So it happens from one part of the cell to the other or from cell to cell or over short distance, right? So usually this type of movement happens within the cell to cell or short distance, right? And there is no energy expenditure that is taking place. So you do not need any kind of energy here, right? So basically, what happens in diffusion is that in diffusion, the molecules move in a random fashion, right? So basically, what happens is that substance move from the region of higher concentration to the region of lower concentration because the concentration difference, right? Difference in concentration, so there is no energy required. But then diffusion is a slow process. Remember that diffusion is a slow process, right? What is the positive point? That it is not dependent on a living system. It does not require energy and it is not dependent on a living system. Now where does diffusion happens? It happens in gases and liquids, but diffusion basically in solid is very difficult, right? So usually in case of short distance or within a cell or cell to cell movement happens through diffusion without using any kind of energy for gases and liquids, right? But diffusion is very important in case of plants since it is the only means for gaseous movement within the plant body. Remember that diffusion is the only means of gaseous movement in plants. Right? Now, diffusion rates, the rate of diffusion are affected by gradient of concentration, by permeability of membrane, which is separating them, temperature and pressure. So remember that diffusion rates that is affected by Gradient of concentration, that is first. Second is permeability. So how permeable is the membrane which is separating them, right? And temperature and pressure, right? So this is all about diffusion. Now we'll see facilitated diffusion. So for what is facilitated diffusion? Now basically diffusion rate also depends on the size of the substance, right? So basically what we studied till now here is that gradient must already be present for diffusion to occur, right? And diffusion rate also depends on the size of the substance. So basically, it means that the smaller substance diffuse faster, right? Now, diffusion of any substance across a membrane also depends on its solubility in lipids because of the plasma membrane, right? Because lipids are the major constituent of the plasma membrane. Now, substances which are soluble to lipids, they diffuse through the membrane faster, and substances that have hydrophilic moiety, right? They find it difficult to pass through the membrane. So their movement has to be facilitated. So basically, substances which are hydrophilic in nature, they they have this difficulty to pass through the membrane, and their movement has to be facilitated, right? So basically membrane proteins are present which provide sites at which such molecules cross the membrane. So there are several proteins which are present in the membrane, and these proteins provide sites through which these molecules cross the membrane, right? So basically, they do not set up a concentration gradient. They do not pass because of the concentration gradient, right? That must already be present for molecules to diffuse, even if facilitated by the proteins. So this facilitated diffusion is basically nothing but it in some cases where the molecules have hydrophilic moiety, they need assistance for their movement across the membrane, and this process is known as facilitated diffusion. Right? Now, in facilitated diffusion, what happens? So, in facilitated diffusion, there are special proteins which help the substance to move across the membrane. Now, this is done without any expenditure of ATP, right? So, this is done without any expenditure of energy. Right. Now, facilitated diffusion cannot cause net transport of molecule for a low to high concentration because that would require energy. So remember that again, facilitated diffusion does not happen when the concentration gradient is basically from low to high. It will be done only when the concentration gradient is from high to low. So you have to go from high to low. It's just that there are some molecules which have hydrophilic moiety and they are not able to go across the membrane, and then there they are facilitated by the proteins which are present on the membrane, right? Now, what happens is that the transport rate reaches a maximum when all the protein transporters are being used. Basically, all the protein transporters are saturated, right? Now, this facilitated diffusion is very specific. Remember that this facilitated diffusion is very specific. So it allows cell to select substance that they want to uptake, right? So what I said is that facilitated diffusion is very specific, right? So basically it allows the cell to choose the uptake, whether the cell wants to allow the substance to come across the membrane or not, right? So basically, it is sensitive to inhibitors which react with the protein side chain. So say if there are inhibitors and if the cell passes signal to the inhibitor to not allow the substance to pass, the substance will not be able to pass through the membrane, right? Now the proteins, how they help the substance to pass across, they form channels in the membranes, right? What they do is they form channels in the membranes, and through these channels the molecules pass through. Now same channels are always what happens is that in some cases there are channels which are always open, and there are some cases where channels are controlled, right? Again, some are large, which allow a large variety of molecules to cross, and some are small in size, right? So these channels, what happens is some are always open, some are controlled ones. In the same way, there are some channels which are large in size and some are smaller in size, right? Now, there are proteins which are known as porins. Porins. So porins are proteins that form huge pores in the outer membrane of plastids, mitochondria, and in some bacteria as well, and they allow molecules up to the size of small proteins to pass through, right? So remember this name, porins, right? So porins are proteins that form huge pores in the outer membrane of plastids, mitochondria, and some bacteria, and they allow molecules up to the size of small proteins to pass through, right? Now, if you see this diagram, this is for facilitated diffusion. So what is happening is that this is the membrane and this is the outer side of the cell. Okay. Now say these are the substances, guys, and they have to go across, right? So they move across this protein. They enter from here and they come inside the cell, right? So what is happening is now as they come inside, if you see the other diagram, basically again this is the membrane, this is the outer side of the cell. Now this is the again transport protein. This is the transported molecule which has come inside. So basically this area is the inner side of the cell, right? So this is all about facilitated diffusion, right? Now, basically, what happens is that, the transport protein, how do they help? They basically rotate and they release the molecule. So basically, here you are, what you're seeing is that this molecule substance is coming and attaching to this side. Now, this protein is rotating, right? Now, this has rotated here and it then transports the molecule towards the inner side of the cell, right? Now, what happens is, say, water channel. So, an example is water channels. If we talk about water channels in the cell, they are made up of 8 different types of aquaporins. Water channels in plants are made up of 8 different types of aquaporins, right? Now, what you'll see is different types of facilitated diffusion, guys, right? So, the first is passive symport and antiport. We'll see what is passive symport and antiport, right? So what happens in passive symport and antiport, right? So some carrier or transport proteins, they allow diffusion only if two types of molecules move together, right? So basically, they'll have to have two types of molecules to be transported, right? So basically, in a symport, remember, in a symport, both molecules cross the membrane in same direction. So in symport, both molecules cross the membrane in same direction, right? What happens in antiport? Antiport. In antiport, both the molecules cross the membrane in opposite direction, right? So in antiport, both the molecules cross the membrane in opposite direction. And when a molecule moves across a membrane independent of the other molecule. So now third is uniport. Uniport is something when a molecule moves across the membrane independent. Now, both the molecules are not dependent on each other, right? Independent of the other molecule. It is uniport. It is what? Uniport, right? So, we'll see the same thing here in the diagram as well. So, basically, if you can guess which is which one, basically, this is symport. How is it symport? There are two molecules A and B, and they are both crossing the membrane in the same direction, right? Now, the second one is antiport. So, this is the antiport where we have two molecules A and B, and they're crossing the same membrane in opposite direction, right? Third one is uniport. Here, the molecule A is crossing the membrane being independent of the other molecule B. And what is this? What is this structure? This is carrier protein, right? So this is all about facilitated diffusion. Now what we'll see the next is active transport. What is active transport? Now active transport requires energy. Remember that. Anything that is passive in case of transport doesn't require energy. Active transport requires energy, right? So basically, active transport uses energy to pump molecules against the concentration gradient. So what is the difference between diffusion, facilitated diffusion and active transport? Diffusion and facilitated diffusion do not require energy, but they always work towards the concentration gradient. Here in active transport, you use energy and you move the molecule against the concentration gradient. So basically, you can move the molecule from low concentration to high concentration, right? So active transport is carried out by membrane proteins, right? So there are again different proteins in the membrane which play a major role in both active as well as passive transport, right? Now, pumps are proteins that use energy to carry substance across the cell membrane. These pumps are transport substance. Basically, these pumps can transport substances from low concentration to high concentration, which is also known as uphill transport. Right. Now here again the transport rate reaches a maximum when all the protein transporters are being used. So basically all of them are saturated. Right. So say we have enzymes as the carrier proteins in very specific, and it carries the molecules across the membrane, right? So basically again guys, here these proteins are sensitive to inhibitors, right? And it will depend on the cell whether it wants to allow the substance to enter inside or not, right? So let's just see the comparison of different transport proteins once. So see, the first one is simple diffusion, right? It requires special membrane proteins? No. But facilitated and active transport, yes, they do require. Then highly selective. Simple diffusion is not selective, but facilitated diffusion and active transport, yes, both of them are selective. Transport saturates, right? So yes, basically the other two, facilitated transport and active transport, yes, they transport saturates, but simple diffusion doesn't. Uphill transport, it happens only in active transport from low concentration to high concentration. It is not done in either of these simple diffusion or facilitated diffusion. Requires ATP. Simple diffusion and facilitated diffusion doesn't require ATP, but active transport do requires ATP, right? It happens only with the help of energy. So guys, with this we have completed different type of transport mechanisms which basically happen in what short distances, right? This happens in short distances. We'll see more types of relations. We'll see plant water relations. We'll see the water potential. We'll see the phloem transport in the coming videos as well. So I hope you've understood the basics of passive and active transport. If yes, please do like the video, share it with your friends, and yes, if you're new to the channel, please do subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon. And please do remember to give me your feedback. If you have any doubt, what you can do is you can just mention your doubt in the comments, or you can also send your doubts over WhatsApp. And the WhatsApp number is given in the description of the video, guys. But yes, please do give your feedback. Okay, guys, see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.